So in this video, as I promised in my introduction or promo video, that we will definitely provide a detailed introduction of what we are going to cover in this course. So this is that lecture. So let's see in detail what we will learn in this course, right? So move ahead. As I said, this part is not very different. We are covering Spring Boot 2. All the 5 microservices or 6 microservices are in Spring Boot 2. We'll cover the ecosystem, service discovery, remote configuration as well, couple of them. And if you are interested in learning more about circuit breaker and declarative client, you can take any one of my other courses. Then we'll move on to RabbitMQ point-to-point publisher consumer applications. We have 2 microservices here, one Spring Boot publisher and another Spring Boot consumer. Both are running in separate Java process using RabbitMQ broker as an intermediary. And then we'll move out to RabbitMQ Fanout. What is Fanout? Fanout is the concept of your publisher will send one message, and that message will be consumed by multiple consumers. So you have one publisher, 2 consumers, which are accounts receivable and fulfillment. So you are publishing a sales order. Imagine you are selling something, and that the moment that sale happens, several departments of your organization are interested to know what happened. The accounts receivable department, which collects money from customers, they are interested in knowing that a sale has happened, and the fulfillment department, which actually ships the products to your customers, they are interested as well to know what happened. So there is a single event taking place in your company. You are making a sale, but multiple people or multiple departments are interested in that single event, and that is the business case of the fan out. You are publishing that single event to multiple consumers, like a broadcasting system. Of course, this is not broadcasting. With that done, as I said, 3 application here. With that done, we'll move out to clarify about AWS, Amazon Web Service, very popular, most popular cloud among all clouds. We will also clarify what is cloud in general, what is virtualization, and what is containerization, of course. And then we will also define a lot of definitions for AWS. When the section comes, you will see what we are covering. We'll cover CIDR, we'll cover VPC, we'll cover AWS regions and availability zone, network access control list, NACL, and lot other EC2, RDS, simple queuing service. All this we will cover. Very important in understanding AWS is classless interdomain routing, or CIDR. AWS networking, I believe, is a core foundation of our understanding of AWS. So that's something we will cover in some context. And then we'll move on to AWS elastic computing, VM. That is another fundamental aspect. Our application use relational database. We will use AWS RDS to demonstrate how MySQL database can be created. And finally, we will last AWS object we will create is a simple queuing service queues. And then once those are done, we will move on to developing 3 applications, 3 Spring Boot applications, 1 publisher, 2 consumers. So that is the agenda of the course. This is the architecture. We will talk, as I promised, we will talk in detail about this architecture here. So on the left hand side, top left corner, you will see Spring Boot account registration, application, publisher, producer. We have a single application. This is a very common use case. The moment you have seen multiple times in your life, the moment you register in a website, you get an email after a few minutes. What happens? So that's what we will demonstrate here. We will have an account controller, which is just a Spring public API. Then account controller will have a auto-add object for account service. Account service will have an account repository, which is also auto-add. We are writing an interface. Account repository will persist the data into local AWS MySQL. As I said, RDS is there, but we will use RDS in AWS, not here. So that is simple. Like you are calling a REST API, and the REST API is persisting data to MySQL. That's all simple, understood. we need to send an email. How to send an email? We cannot take time. Nobody does that. We cannot take time to make the account controller or account service responsible for actually sending the email. Sending email is slow, and then our response to our customer will be slow as well. We cannot afford that. So what we'll do, we will send an asynchronous, without blocking the customer, asynchronous message or event using Spring Events to account event listener, right? That account event listener is a listener internal to Spring, and that listener is having an auto-word object class called account event sender. Account event sender actually sends the event to accounts exchange, which lives within RabbitMQ. We will define what exchanges and what queues are inside slightly later in the course. So that bigger box you can see is the RabbitMQ broker. The RabbitMQ broker actually sends, or I would say the Spring Boot account registration application consumer. There are two separate boxes running separately in two JVMs. Actually binds on, when it comes up, binds to the accounts queue. So whenever the accounts exchange direct RabbitMQ exchange passes a new message to the account queue, it automatically arrives into Spring Boot account registration. So it is pretty simple. We have a pretty lightweight as well. We have a single Java class annotated with an annotation to tell Spring whenever there is a new message, it should invoke that method. It's pretty simple. Then that guy actually calls another listener, RabbitMQ Spring Boot AMQP starter event listener, which actually invokes the Spring Boot email sender, and we are using Spring Boot SMTP starter project, and that uses Google SMTP email server to send an email. So you are getting an email for registration, right? So that is the detailed description of what we will cover in the point to point. Let's move on. This is Fanout. As I said, there are three applications. On the left corner you can see Spring Boot account registration application publisher producer. Oh, by the way, I forgot one thing. Both of these, point to point and Fanout, are using service discovery and config service. The config service is getting properties from a GitHub config repository. We will describe that. Then you as a user will invoke the sell sorter controller, which is Java REST API, that will invoke the sell sorter service, which is auto-add. Sell sorter repository, DAO repository, it is simple enough, will persist into local MySQL. As I said, sending messages should not be synchronously done. So we are doing sell sorter event listener here, and which is asynchronous. Sell sorter event sender sends to Fanout exchange. There are multiple types of exchanges we will define when we talk about RabbitMQ in detail, and then that exchange is bound to two queues, not one, fulfillment queue and accounts queue. So as I said, when you are making a sale, multiple departments are interested. So these are the right hand side, these are the two departments. One is the account receivable department, another is the fulfillment department who actually ships the product. So they are receiving the same message, right? And they are saving in their own data stores. So that's the detailed description of the Fanout architecture. Let's move on. AWS. We will run two Spring Boot application in one single AWS EC2 instance. But before we actually go there, before we start creating AWS objects, before we start writing AWS Spring Boot programs, we will give you a solid understanding of what is cloud and what is AWS region, what is AWS availability zone, everything. We will define line by line clearly, and we will also try to answer your questions, and then we will actually get our hands dirty and start developing, right? So that is the introduction, and I will take your leave here. I hope to see you. At this point, I hope the descriptions are clear, the architecture is clear. You can visualize what we are going to do, and then we will actually get our hand dirty, from the next section. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any question. Thank you. Bye.